What's going on, everyone? Welcome, guys, to the Staying Alpha live stream. And today we're going to be talking about VeVe NFTs, VeVe digital collectibles, also as well as DC comic NFTs, Marvel NFTs, how they're doing on OpenSeas, Marvel copyright infringements, DC copyright infringements, and so much more. We have a hell of a stream, guys, today. And we have special guest Shane Davis and the Comic Way joining us for the stream. So Shane Davis, a DC Comics comic book artist, joining us today. How are you, Shane? How are you? How are you doing today?
I'm sorry, that's my tagline, man. I have to come in the room with a bam. All right, how's it going? Good to see you guys. I'm grateful to be here.
Hey, it's a pleasure having you on the stream, especially your background on where you're coming from, how long you've been doing this work. You have incredible comic books out there that you have done art with, especially Superman, Earth One, several Batman comic book artwork as well. So it's just amazing to have you, and especially now with the NFT boom that we are seeing. It's a pleasure to have you, and I love your collection that you actually have on your background.
You know, most of the streams I'm on, nobody is happy that I'm there. Thank you. I like that somebody welcomed me to a stream. Thank you very much.
Hey, it's a pleasure because I like enlightenment. And so whatever knowledge we could take from you, the better. You know, the good with the bad. And guys, last but not least is the Comic Way. You guys have seen them in a lot of the VeVe streams. Very knowledgeable on comic books. And when it comes to VeVe NFTs, he's very detailed on the on the actual collectibles that VeVe delivers. And he looks at the smallest details on why some of these NFTs will rise up in value. So Comic Way, welcome to the stream.
Hey, thanks for having me, Alpha. Hey, I'm a huge fan, Shane. You've had your work.
Oh, thanks. You know, that never gets old.
Yeah.
Hearing people say
Superman Earth One, man. That's one of my favorite Superman comics.
Thanks. That was a big piece of work. I worked on that for about a year. My life went into that one book. Wow. So it's nice to know it stands the test of time and people still enjoy it today.
Absolutely. I didn't know you were such a big Star Wars fan just by looking at the Mando helmet in the background, all the Star Wars toys.
Yeah, I'm a big Boba Fett helmet guy. I love me some Boba Fett. Mandalorian, I did like it until the whole Gina Carano thing, but that's not here nor there.
Yeah, hey, I'm just glad you're a Star Wars fan. That'd be awesome if you did some Star Wars comic artwork one day.
Believe it or not, I actually turned down some Star Wars work at one point in time. So yeah, I kind of look back at it and kind of regret it. You know, it comes up and bites me in the butt. But it was just a cover with a bunch of Ewoks on it. So I did turn down some Ewoks.
Hey, well, Shane, you're a legend in the comic community. Superman Earth One, that's one of the best ones of all time as far as Superman comics go.
Thanks,
hey, I don't know if you knew, but hey, Alpha, did you know that Shane's DC Direct Superman could be an NFT on VeVe at one point?
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they have a Superman from Earth One that it's based on Shane's artwork, and we could see that on VeVe at some point, man. It's a really cool looking Superman, man. You should pull it up for us if you want. Just put DC Direct statue by Shane.
Yeah, it's like the Man of Steel Superman statue. Like it just says, man, that was the name of the line. You know how like they had like Batman Black and White.
You want me to send it to your Twitter, Alpha?
Yeah, you can send it and I'll pull it up.
I'm gonna send it to you right now, dude.
That'd be great. So we're going to be, guys, talking about VeVe. And as you see, that's why I have myself, which I'm more neutral. I'm more of a flipper when it comes to NFTs. Then I have the Comic Way that he's really into collectibles and, you know, wants to hold these collectibles for a long term. And then I have Shane, that he's actually been in the business for comic books for many, many years now. Okay. So Shane, just a little bit about yourself. What got you started? How did you get started into comic books? And how did you actually join DC Comics?
Well, I got started in the comics just because I like drawing comics. Even as a kid, I was drawing at like 13 years old. I took it very serious. I started trying to do pages like probably the age, I don't know, 15, 16, 17, going to Comic Con, showing my portfolio even as a kid. I mean, at this point, they couldn't legally hire me. I was not even working age, even if I was that good. And then eventually I went to the Kubert School. And from there, I would basically go up and shop around my portfolio at Marvel and DC Comics on foot in New York City and do samples and stuff. And then I ended up basically working in licensing artwork. Now, the licensing artwork department is basically whenever you see a Batman t-shirt or something like that. So there's like Batman t-shirts that I drew when I was probably like in like 21 years old or 20. So that stuff still is in the stores today. And eventually I was going through basically the whole Batman library, redrawing like all this style guide artwork and trying to refurbish it and make it spicy and pull it up. So I was going through and redoing all of this over Garcia Lopez. If you know who I'm talking about, you may or may not. But whenever you see a classic Green Lantern shirt or a classic Superman t-shirt, and it's like that classic drawing, they basically wanted me to go through and redo all the Batman stuff he had done just to try to resell the same artwork over and over again. And from there, I got picked up for some Batman fill-ins. I think it was Under the Hood, the Red Hood storyline. Doug Mahnke was missing some issues, so I got a fill-in on that. And from there, I went into the Batman annual. Right off the bat, they were kind of like, "You're awesome," which was funny because they wouldn't hire me for comic book artwork, and that's how I ended up in the licensing department. And then as soon as I started turning in pages when somebody messed up their deadline, they're like, "You're awesome. Let's get you a Batman annual." I blew the doors off that. Like it was the top selling comic earning financially, money wise, because it was an annual. It was oversized. It cost probably $1 more than the other comics. And it was the top earning DC comic of that month. And then from there, I went on to, I think, JLA. No, I was on Mysteries in Space. That's right. I was on Mysteries in Space. That was my first comic ongoing series. And that was with Jim Starlin. Jim Starlin is the creator of Thanos. So I got to work with Jim Starlin. And that's where it's interesting. That's where I got like a lot of information about creator rights, filing for equity on characters and stuff like that was from Jim Starlin. And he would just tell me about the industry and some practices that may come up in this. But a lot of knowledge and wisdom on that end, on the business side of comics. And then from there, I went on to work on Superman, Batman, Superman Earth 1, Rage of the Red Lanterns. I created a lot of the Red Lanterns for Green Lantern. You see the Red Lanterns like in Injustice 2, Lego games, stuff like that. Famously created a Dexter, the cat, the Rage Cat from DC Comics. So created a lot of the Red Lanterns, Bleeze, Scalox. A lot of these characters pop up in like Justice League action, a lot of cartoons, Lego movies, things like that. And did some work at Marvel. 20 years, I've been popping around all around in different things. Did some work on Legends of the Dark Knight. Wrote some books like the Legend Dark Knight story I wrote. And drew at DC Comics. It was a two issue thing, and then did some creator-owned stuff at Image. So I basically worked all around the comic book industry, either just in the licensing department, in the actual comic books, DC Direct, like the statue you pulled up. I actually drew artwork that the sculptors worked off of that. Had a line of action figures for Superman, Batman. That was through DC Direct, an Atrocitus statue, and characters I've created have been statues like Bleeze. There was a nice art term statue that, I have equity in that character, so I would get paid for that statue, even though I didn't work on it. So, it's interesting because in my time in comics, I have created things that have became everything from Lego characters in video games to characters in a cartoon show for kids, even characters that end up in like superhero girls, like Bleeze has been in multiple variations. So, it's interesting when you're a comic book artist, you can be technically an animation or a character designer for animation and video games. Comics can cover like everything. A lot of people don't know this, but like, Superman Earth 1 was, sampled and pulled from and inspired the Man of Steel movie, which DC paid me some for that. So, and there for a while, I even worked with Legendary Comics, which was a division of the Legendary Studios. And I got to work with Max Brooks from World War Z. So we developed something there for that could potentially be a movie one day. So yeah, I've been around.
Yeah, you have an extensive
Yeah.
background, which is awesome because it's just so much knowledge, and we're just here trying to catch up with you. But it's awesome. What you bring to the table is amazing, and also just like one of the comments from Bruce Lawrence, he worked with the guy that created Thanos.
Yeah. It was really important, I think, in my career that because I was a big Silver Surfer fan, so I had the option of working on Power Man at Marvel with Peter David, or working on this unknown character at DC Comics called Captain Comet with Jim Starlin. So I picked working with Jim Starlin because I was a big fan of Jim Starlin's Infinity Gauntlet stuff. And I honestly, the year I worked with him, the conversations I had with him at conventions and stuff, just talking about creator rights, and he was part of a board discussing. You have to understand, comics were originally just single issues. They were out 1 month, and that was it. And then one day they were like, we want to do the Death of Captain Marvel, which was going to be an oversized comic book that was in like a magazine print size. Like it was not the 22-page comic. And it would stay on the shelf longer than 1 month. So they had to, at the time, reevaluate a royalty system, because this would be something that's just, it didn't have a 30-day expiration date on it. So how do you keep paying a creator if you're going to keep it in print and ideally keep it out there? Now, this is before the trade paperback. Like this, the graphic novel didn't exist at this point. So they built a royalty system on what they thought was fair. It was Jim Shooter and a committee of writers, and Jim Starlin was one of those people on the committee. And what's funny is when DC Comics basically wanted to keep Watchmen and not give it back to Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, they created what is the graphic novel. By keeping it in print, they never had to return it back to the creators. So that same royalty system that was, again, like established by this committee of writers for a book, that was just going to be printed more than 30 days, just became inherent to the graphic novel system. And then eventually only classics were in graphic novel, like Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen, of course. And then eventually everything became a graphic novel. And it's weird because we're going to talk about NFTs and stuff like this. But a lot of the practices in comics were always behind technology, and we're always, as far as dealing with creators, the graphic novel is something that we just kind of tripped into for different reasons, and it just took hold. So, and nobody really sat down and said, what's a fair shake at a percentage on a graphic novel before we were already into it,
So now the graphic novel is what could relate to NFTs.
In a way, yeah.
So if there was some type of clause that someone would have spoken about it, then we would have more clarity on what type of rights an artist would have had to these NFTs.
Well, everything gets kind of muddy, and ideally that's where a lot of companies like it. They, if anybody hands
gray
you
area,
they like gray area. You can't see through it. You can't really see what's in front of you. So, what we got here, non-fungible tokens, right?
Hey, Alpha. Hey, Shane. Let's say they make that statue, the one Alpha just pulled up for us, the statue from Superman Earth 1. If VeVe released that as an NFT, how much share of that would you actually get? I mean, can they actually release that without your approval? Because I know that's been an issue too.
Yes, because they own it. I was paid $500 to draw this.
Okay.
And that's the only money I've ever received from the statue. No
so
matter
if they
how
make
many
8,000 of those and they sell each one for $90, you don't get any of that?
No, I get no royalty on it whatsoever.
Wow. Damn, that's kind of sad, man.
Yeah, no, well, it is.
Great model that's based on your work.
Yeah, no, it's well, that's just a model on the statue. Now we're going to go to NFTs. They don't owe me anything off of this. Now, the only thing that's going to change creators getting paid for this type of thing is the publicity behind it.
Okay.
The black eye that hits them in the comic book industry. Now, that letter you pulled up, there has not been another email addressing this. So to my knowledge right now, the company really hasn't addressed this with creators. unless it went to my spam folder or something. This is the last time they've addressed it. And of course, they're moving forward with it. Now, I'm pretty sure that if my memory serves, this is the one that's kind of putting people in place to quit running through the door on NFTs until they figure out what the breakdown is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as a creator, a lot of people were running into the NFT market right away with their artwork, and they were selling it. Now, this is where I'm not wanting to go down a real long road on this story, but to get you an understanding of it, at one point in time, creators didn't get their original artwork back. And actually, back in the day, a lot of stuff was incinerated because, building codes and everything, paper just being stacked up by the publishers was a fire hazard. So a lot of original comic artwork was incinerated. That they don't exist. I'm talking like you're going back to like the 50s, 60s, whatever, that a lot of that stuff doesn't exist. And some of the things that did sneak out, they were pulled out from the incinerator and somebody held on to them. And then later on, they're on the market. So when you do see a piece, it oftentimes isn't from that creator that drew it. It's from somebody that snuck it out from the incinerator. So with that said, Neil Adams thought there was an issue with Jack Kirby where Marvel had kept all these originals from him. For talking about his big run on Fantastic Four, things like that. And Neil Adams fought to get originals back for Neil Adams, and in that case, getting originals back for all these artists. Now, Neil Adams had Continuity Studios. For people who don't know, that was a studio he formed that basically did some comics like Mr. T comics and licensed books like that. He did a book like, I think, Bucky O'Hare. But he was doing a lot of storyboards and hiring a lot of artists like Bill Sienkiewicz, Frank Miller, people like that actually came through Continuity. So basically, Neil Adams had FU money. So Neil Adams kind of fought that, originals should return back to artists because there's some monetary value in this. Jack Kirby ended up getting his originals back, and creators basically, I penciled something and somebody inked my artwork, we have like a 2/3 break, meaning 1/3 of my artwork goes to the inker. If I ink it myself, all of it comes to me. And this is just a breakdown that we keep. And it says I get the artwork after like it publishes, not before. That means I can't sell it until the actual book's published for one main reason. And this is where all the legal stuff comes in, really what comics is about. And I'm not trying to take a dump on comics. I love comics. I'm a big fan. I love drawing comics. But the reason they don't want you to sell it is because they want to print it. And if you look at the bottom of any comic book, you open it up, there's copyright information. So basically, you can't sell or trade your artwork until it's printed, they own it, and now you can have your artwork back because they own your artwork at that point to some degree. They own the reproduction. So when you sign a work for hire agreement, you sign away all reproduction rights. But you also says in your work for hire agreement, which I did a video about on my YouTube channel, I am granted my original artwork back to sell it. Now, I can't reproduce it without DC Comics' permission or Marvel or whoever. That means like it's technically illegal for me to try to reprint Superman Earth 1 and sell it as my own book. I can't do that. But I can sell those original artworks. And
so you only have a one-of-a-kind artwork to sell.
Right.
One kind, that's it. You can't make 3 or 4 and sign them and sell them.
So this is like a Batman original here, right? So this is an original piece of artwork, DC.
That's an actual comic cover. That's the original.
Yeah, an actual comic cover.
Right there.
Right. So I can sell this, and my work for hire agreement says this is mine to sell. So awesome. Where the NFT gets tricky is DC Comics can reproduce this as much as they want. It could be on a t-shirt, it could be whatever. They hold the right to reproduction. I hold the right to sell the original. So here's the gray area. Where's the NFT at?
So that NFT, that DC Direct
because technically, hang on. This is where it's tricky. Technically, the NFT is arguably a reproduction.
A reproductive, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's also technically the original. You're trading off the original artwork at the same time, which you granted to me to sell. And part of the reason and part of the argument that they were like, well, let's give people their original artwork back was to keep rates from going up. That we were talking about, it's not a big secret in the comic book industry, but comic book page rates, I'm talking about pencil rates, writing page rates, and ink rates, all of these people that work in comics, hasn't really gone up since like the 90s. Okay, like, so if rates aren't going up, a lot of people say this is how Marvel and DC Comics treat it. They're like, well, we can't give you a raise, but maybe we'll put you on a book that sells better. Now, used to a book that sells better would be, of course, Batman, Spider-Man, X-Men, stuff like that. Now there's some ebbs and flows here where X-Men's in the trash and it's not selling well, or Spider-Man's in a rut. So, but ideally, if you're an original comic book artist guy, like you're a penciler or whatever, and you get those originals back, or even if you're an inker and you're like, well, I'm not getting paid more for my inks, and they're like, well, we'll try to get you on Batman and make up for not getting you a raise, or you haven't had a raise in 10 years. Your raise is working on Batman, getting a third of those originals back if you're an inker, 2/3 if you're a penciler, and selling those, because Batman pages will go for more money. So the returning originals was a way, and the dates are weird. I want to say it was in 78 or 79 or maybe even 84. I got all these dates floating around my head, but it was some time in that era that this was established. And again, with the help of Neil Adams, who was a big advocate for this. With that, they just didn't have to go up on rates really that much. It went up a little bit when comics were selling a lot. Going into the 90s, comics were selling so much that, people really were just chasing royalties on the books. That there were books that had high royalties and they just wanted to be on there. They didn't even care. I'm talking about there were comic creators, I've been told stories, they were getting like $40,000 checks off of working off of, like, say, Sabretooth #1, just because people were over ordering that stuff. And there's been a lot of things that's happened in the comic book industry that has muddled the business of being paid, like the trade, going back to the original graphic novel, and then we'll go into digital. There's all these, what I'm going to call new technology. Let's pretend the concept of a trade paperback or OGN or whatever is new technology, even though it's just paper. That being new technology, there's a royalty system built off of it. And you're like, well, I'm going to get a royalty right out the gate, even if it's like 4% off the cover price or something like that. That's better than nothing. You're like, well, I'm already getting paid for the single and I'm getting paid for that. But at one point in time, the way comics were bought and ordered, say like Chris Claremont's X-Men run, retailers would just order extra cases of that book and they would put them in the back room. And if you'll notice in old comics, when you look down below at a panel, it says, to see this story, read X-Men #121, or I'm reading Amazing Spider-Man. It says, now go check out at the bottom, editor note, go check out Spectacular Spider-Man this, or Web of Spider-Man this, number this, to understand the reference. The reason that was there is because you would go back to your comic shop and be like, oh, I need to track down this issue of the first fight with whatever in your comic book shop guy. Maybe I have one. He'd go back in his back room, pull out a backlist. He was already selling more. So there wasn't a bunch. The sales, people were getting a royalty off of stuff because of the way people were ordering. Here comes new technology. Here comes the graphic novel. Well, now retailers don't need to order so many back issues anymore. So new technology starts to affect basically your sales on single issues. And I've even brought this up with creators in a group, like back in 2016. It was a group of us in comic creators, and I was like, did anybody ever stop and say, did we need to reevaluate our royalty systems because one thing's ingesting the other thing? So I mean, and a lot of people are like, maybe comic sales will come back where people are making good royalties and stuff off single issues, and the answer is no, because of trade paperbacks, because of collected editions. There's no need for people to keep like all these single back issues anymore. Like, because if that was a different thing back then, they were overselling so people could go back and catch up on single issues they missed. Now it's just graphic novels. Now, ideally, the market would still work with that new technology because comic shops would then start selling trades, except they can't because they can't compete with Amazon, because Amazon's content cutting the price. If a trade is $20, Amazon cuts it down to like 11. They base the trade costs $10 from DC Comics. Amazon's content with making $1. A comic book shop retailer can't compete with that. They have to pay rent, brick and mortar stores. So comic shops first did try to get into trades, and then they just had to kind of abandon the trade market. And most comic shops don't really keep up with it. If you'll go into most comic shops, they don't really invest a lot of their money into trade paperbacks, just because they can't get stuck with them, and they can't compete with what you can get it for on Amazon. So new technology oftentimes disrupts the comic book industry in a way, and digital was another thing. Digital came along, and digital actually disrupted the comic book industry in the way of it led to pirating. So a lot of comics are very piratable because the comic book industry, since 2010, and I actually saw the effects of this right away, because Borders and Barnes & Noble were still around at the time. So the book market was really good for original graphic novels and stuff, hence like why we did Superman Earth 1. And once that book went out, they got ahead of the iPad was coming out, and everybody was wanting to go digital. Like, if it's funny, and if you go back and look at the original Steve Jobs, promo of the iPad, it was all about reading books, even though everybody uses tablets for a lot of things. It's not reading books. So comics really went in on it. They wanted to just be there up front. Comixology was like basically a tech guy trying to absorb all of these accounts to try to basically sell off to Amazon, which is what he did. He sold Comixology to Amazon after he got all these accounts. But getting back, they did like an exclusive deal with Superman Earth 1 to Kindle, which then ticked off Barnes & Noble, and then Barnes & Noble retaliated and pulled every Kindle book off the shelf. So Superman Earth 1 was on the New York Times bestsellers list, I think 34 weeks, and week 35, it was pulled off the shelf by Barnes & Noble.
Yeah.
And, so the market's always disrupted by chasing new technology, and digital. And to explain the digital thing in a nutshell, it's a perfect engine for a comic book company not to print on paper, not have printing costs. They turn around, there's no shipping cost. They cut out the middleman, and it's just electronic. The problem, so basically the print file is what you're basically buying, what we would send to a printer. Now, the problem is it gets loose on the internet, and then it's, pirating happens.
Yeah.
And
just like movies, music.
Right.
So piracy accounts for comic books as well.
And with NFTs, from my understanding, the blockchain technology, right, is basically what keeps it from being, it gets a code, right? It gets it's a unique stamp of authenticity.
Exactly. It's just a digital asset that's going to be tracked on a blockchain. And, either that blockchain most of the time is Ethereum right now, which is one of the big ones for NFTs. And
just to put how digital...
the authenticity.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, through the blockchain, that's how we know that is edition number 103, edition number 1 that you're actually carrying through the blockchain.
Just to leave on the note of the piracy being an issue, there was we did a video on a X Factor book that was being canceled by Marvel that probably sold up under 20-some thousand copies, maybe mid-20s, and it was being canceled. It was selling almost had 500,000 views or something like that on a pirated comic. So that's how people aren't buying the book, but maybe because they don't think it's worth their money. It's a trash comic with a trash story, or they think it's very social justice warrior or propaganda or stuff like that, but that doesn't keep people from reading it for free. So like, I kind of wonder NFTs, and especially if they want to get more into like actual NFT comics, like digital comics that have an NFT type coding. I don't know how that's going to work, because then at least it's collectible, whereas like digital comics, that was always the argument, is like against digital, is they're not collectible. Everybody was pro digital at first, but people at DC, I knew, I'm talking 10 years later, I'm at San Diego Comic Con in DC Comics Green Room. I'm talking to a guy that's vice president, without naming his name, of the digital sales. And I'm like, digital didn't make any money. He's like, I know. And it just led to pirating. I'm like, I know. And I go, well, it scared a lot of retailers too, because they thought they were just gonna, become dinosaurs and, not necessary. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, why did you guys do it? He goes, it just looked like we were doing something. And that's the thing with digital is a lot of VPs in the company, it just sounds good. You have to understand these companies are owned by Warner Brothers or Disney, which now Warner Brothers was owned by AT&T and now being sold out to Discovery. It just looks good. Well, what are you doing, and what justifies your salary as a VP? Well, I'm chasing this digital initiative, and it always just looks good on paper because, again, there's so much cost, cutting out the middleman, cost reduction, if you could get digital to work. Now, NFTs could be a thing that will work as far as digital comics, and it's collectible, and comics always chases collectibles. This is going to make me sound kind of old, but there were things like, trading cards were really popular in like the 90s. And then for 1 second, there was something called Pogs. And they were like these little cardboard disc cutout things. And they were trying to sell them as the next big collectible. They didn't take, they were just Pogs, like, yeah. But the comic,
I had a whole bunch for a little while.
But the comic industry will constantly chase this stuff because comics have historically always been collectible. So why not, right? Look, I have tons of collectibles around me. Like I collect stuff, whether it's a Lego set, whether it's a statue, a helmet, whatever, books. So I understand the value of NFTs. And in some weird way, I hope they kind of help the comic book industry. I'm not sure how, I'm not saying I'm skeptical, but
yeah. I mean, in a way, it could bring back the comic book industry, right? Because comic books aren't what they used to be back in the 70s. I'm not sure. I gotta fix my camera here.
Hey, Shane, can I say something about your NFT?
Yeah.
So that NFT, okay, that's a badass NFT. It's from probably your best piece of work, Superman Earth 1. So people that know nothing about your work or about Superman Earth 1, they're going to own that NFT. And guess what they're going to do? They're going to see your name by it, and they're going to go read that comic, Superman Earth 1. That's what I think is going to help happen with those NFTs. Because I already know about it. I already read your work, and I love that piece. But other people who don't and they just collect NFTs, they'll actually look into your history and your work by owning your NFT now.
Well, okay. So I'm always game for trying out new markets and new audience, and I'm always game for that. The issue is going into these new markets, not being covered. Like, so if they sell a bunch of NFTs and then they're like, oh, we found a new audience, which comic industry constantly chases, looking for a new audience. Sometimes they chase whatever hashtags on Twitter and they try to be very proactive, even if it hurts the character or hurts the story or any of these things. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But they're always just chasing a new audience and taking for granted their already existing audience. So I'm at two ends of this. I'm there as a fan and a collector because that's what I was there first, but I'm also here as a creator. And my fear is going into any new markets like this and not being covered for how money breaks apart or how I'm credited or how I'm paid or any of these things, what's the effects on me. And I mean, so this is where we're at with the NFTs. Is it any type of new technology that comes along right now? Like if somebody said, I don't know, like we can sell Spider-Man ice cubes, and we were never able to sell Spider-Man ice cubes, but now there's a big market for Todd McFarlane Spider-Man ice cubes. That's cool that Marvel sells and trades Todd McFarlane Spider-Man ice cubes, but do they have a system to pay Todd McFarlane for, Spider-Man ice cubes? And the reason the companies kind of want to run in first and then figure it out later is they don't retroactively pay anybody. If the agreement's not there going forward into it, whatever money they make until they figure out the breakdown is that money's gone. Like, we're not getting that money. They're not going to go backwards and say, well, this is what we made. Well, if they started an NFT this month and they just figure out in 2022 what the breakdown is, we're getting paid in 2022 going forward. Nothing in 2021. And that's the unfortunate fact here. And the comic creators and the people that make these characters and make these stories and help influence things, the comic industry's never had any type of union. Probably Neil Adams was probably one of the closer things to that, and he was no union. So the issue is really people aren't together. But even if we were together, we would just be on the list of people you don't hire, and they hire somebody else. It's a global market. They're able to hire people from all around the world with different currencies. So a lot of times working in the American comic book industry, my rate is as odd as it is, I'm competing with somebody in Brazil who they work in they live in a whole different economy than the United States. So I'm constantly having to do the best work I can so that hopefully they'll pay me a salary I can live off of in America. Because there's always going to be somebody in a different country with a different currency
for cheaper.
Right. And that's the problem with this. So that right away knocks any type of position that you're able to have a debate on is this fair or not? Because they'll just be like, let's not hire that guy. He's asking too many questions. We don't need that. Let's go to, what economy here looks best to pick from. So that's the one thing I think that's always helped creators that always keeps us behind on these type of things.
So Shane,
go ahead.
Yeah. I have some questions for you. So regarding the comic book, right? And this is let me bring this up. So this is a comic book that is sold by Adam Kubert, and this is the NFT. Right. And it's just the black and white ink that's being sold. And if you look at the description, it states comes with signed graded comic by Adam Kubert. So he's selling the original artwork over here as well with the NFT. So this is the only way really to sell your artwork as an NFT. It has to have the original artwork attached to it.
Right. So what he's doing is making a legal gray area be good metaphor for people you go buy a DVD and it's got a digital copy added to it. Somebody says, hey, we have the rights to sell digital. You're like, yeah, but I sold the physical. It's just that was free along with it. So Adam Kubert Adam Kubert is going to say, I didn't sell the NFT. I sold the physical original, and the NFT was just, like a freebie with it. Yes. So this is, and I mean, I hate to be so blunt about it. Because I feel like that's not the answer you guys want to hear, but that's the corporate navigating legal loophole that So if DC Comics you made X amount of money, or Marvel Comics, you made X amount of money off our characters off of NFTs. No, I sold, which clearly my work for a hire agreement says I have the original to sell. I didn't sell the NFT. I sold, it was just free. You can't yell at me for giving it away, can you? And eventually they'll eventually kick up and say, this is for them to stop him from doing what he just did there, they have to issue a breakdown of NFTs and what they're going to give creators. And yet I have not seen that. That doesn't mean that there's some creators that maybe haven't heard of, they've been on the committee and a talk. I heard about a conversation with legal teams talking to a group of creators. So I know it has been discussed, but they have yet, to my knowledge, issued this is what you guys are getting, like to creators. And keep in mind, this is what's also interesting as the work for hire agreements that we originally sold, that we've signed. We're talking about years. My whole 20-year career, I can't just draw something from Marvel and DC. I have to sign a piece of paper. That piece of paper never covered NFTs. It's covered trades, reproductions, things like that. But they've always said my original artwork comes back to me. So, that's the issue. But this is what's interesting to me is if you go back before the Neil Adams getting original artwork back to creators, people were signing agreements with Marvel and DC Comics that they're not even gifted their artwork back. And that's the legal wording in there. Actually, they say it's a gift from DC Comics. Like they actually say that, or used to, when people would mail in their physical boards to DC Comics mailed it back to you after they scanned it in, and they would actually there was a stamp that they would stamp the backs of all the original artwork, coding it, and all the DC board. Like if you look here in the corner of this board, it says DC Comics, and actually on the board somewhere, I'm not going to be able to read it, but it talks about all rights are reserved, and basically there's even legal copy on the side of the board in non-repo blue down here at the bottom that says that this artwork is DC Comics, the reproduction of this. What's just strange is, again, the legal wording goes back to the originals being gifted to us and given back as part of our work for hire agreement, that we could do with it as we want, except reproduce it. Meaning I have the original cell. The NFT market is interesting because, from my understanding, they can make limited NFTs or one-of-a-kind NFTs, right?
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if Marvel and DC may have an issue with doing, and this is just, I'm no lawyer. I've just dealt with lawyers and contracts, comic contracts and entertainment contracts. I wonder if like Marvel and DC selling one of a kind of a NFT period is an issue legally, but they could sell like 10 NFTs of this cover, but they can't sell just one of these. Like I don't know. And you have to understand too, like legal is oftentimes a problem dealing with these big corporations, because they have you go up to the office. I mean, there's lawyers walking up and down the hallways telling editorial how to navigate things legally, for copyright, or if there's a question of something in the book, or checking on permission of something. I remember I drew a subway train one time, and it was like a Green Lantern cover, and it was a Red Lantern getting ready to get hit by a subway train. And I drew this little symbol that was at the front of the subway train, and DC Legals like pull that out of there. And it's like, what? Well, we had to change that little symbol. And I'm like, why? And like, because we'd have to pay New York City, because that's like they own that image of that symbol. And so we just have to randomly change it, not to have to pay like New York City. It's really weird. So they have on staff lawyers. Where I'm going with this, if anybody was ever to challenge DC Comics on this and stuff, you would just bleed out legally. Like you would just lose. Like no comic artist has that many lawyers on retainer or that type of bonds to go at the company. The real solution for creators in this is really just a fight in the street. That sounds horrible, but there's been a lot of Hollywood Reporter articles popping up recently. I think like one a week, talking about how like Ed Brubaker wasn't really paid for Winter Soldier stuff, and I think maybe had a $5,000 check or something like that. These articles keep popping up, and at the same time, there was an article with Daniel Cherry and Jim Lee talking about how they're really wanting to support creators and all of this stuff, and they're doubling down on comics and stuff like this. Unfortunately, these things rarely ever get solved until they're in the public's eye. Like, and that's the issue. So the NFT thing, the more this comes up, the more this will again get in the public's eye, and they'll probably say, okay, guys, this is your breakdown of what you're getting off of NFT if they trade and sell in your stuff. And
so now that it's getting more of that mass attention, especially with NFTs, with Marvel's getting a lot of attention lately, DC Comics as well, especially with the letter. Now that it's getting more mass attention, then I think the individual artists will start getting paid more. Like you said, now it's getting the attention that it needs. As Marvel and DC Comics, they have attorneys off the yin yang they could go ahead and fight this with.
Yeah, their hallway is just full of editors, or not editors, but lawyers running up and down. So yeah, it's like I'm never going to be able to hire that many.
So it's very competitive. And also it's a shame that you could draw this beautiful artwork, this beautiful piece that could, be a best-selling comic book or go all the way to a movie or a NFT collectible, right? And you get no type of royalties out of it.
Well, right? I think there will be a day that they come up with the terms now, and this is in DC Comics' defense, which I'm not here to defend them. I don't know if they understand the market enough. I do know that they saw some, I think, again, I don't know the artist's name, Wonder Woman artists sell $1 million worth of artwork in NFTs and make a lot of money really quick. And I know that got DC Comics' attention. And you have to understand, DC Comics and Marvel Comics are going to work together on this. You think they're enemies, and you think that they don't really do crossovers. You're never going to see an Avengers versus Justice League movie, and maybe not even a crossover comic. But when it comes to how to handle creators, these companies, and there's history of this, that they would call one another to check somebody's rate just to make sure the other company is not overpaying that talent. So like the companies they share, like, I think the copyright for the word superhero. Like they actually own the word superhero. I can't use the word superhero. If you hear the word superhero in the TV show, Marvel and DC Comics are getting paid. They actually share it. So these companies will work together against creative, and that's the sad part. Like they're going to come up with a terms of agreement, and they're totally going to be in sync on this together. And it's the unfortunate truth of the matter. It's just the reality is they're enemies until they need to navigate a new field, and then they'll set up what works best for them. This will not be what works best for creators. Now, that is just a reality of business, and comic artists have historically been bad businessmen. Now, the good side of this, which is this is where it starts to move into untapped territory, is all the creators have been investing in creator-owned properties. Like you take a creator like Kirkman with Walking Dead, of course, Todd McFarlane with Spawn. These creators are more than set up for NFTs, because any NFT of their character, they own the character. So they're not gonna, if they sell an NFT, they're gonna get 90% of the money or 100% of the profits or whatever, right? They're gonna, there is no company deciding what they do or don't get, and so I think, and this is happening at an accelerated rate right now in the comic book industry, but a lot of creators, James Tynion just left Batman to go to Substack. Snyder left basically DC, says he's still working some at DC, but he did like a big Amazon deal for like 11 books or something like that. So there's a big shift happening right now in the American comic book industry, where a lot of creators are starting to invest in themselves and their own IP. So that's probably, the NFT thing is only going to make that divide, which is already there before the NFT thing, by the way. It's only going to make it a bigger divide between creative wanting to invest years of their life in Marvel and DC Comics, which I grew up as a big Marvel fan. So to me, this divide with creative and corporate comics is actually kind of sad. But the real easy fix to this is just own the characters that you work on, And but I mean, we also understand. I'm a big Batman fan. I'm a big Star Wars fan. I'm a big Evangelion fan, Masters of the Universe, all these things. I would love to draw these characters all day long, but at the end of the day, the companies do own these characters. The only time I ever get any type of participation, and it's a very small participation, is if I create a new character for these companies and I'm granted equity on that character, then I get a small percentage. That's also what's interesting with NFT. Like, let's say I own Dexar, the Red Lantern cat, right? It's based off my real life cat. I don't own it. I share equity in it. DC Comics owns the character, but I'm owed, every time they sell that character in something, I'm owed a percentage. They do an NFT. I'm owed a percentage of that NFT. But now if I did it, but if they have that Superman statue you're talking about and it's NFT, DC Comics doesn't owe me anything because I don't have equity in Superman. This is where everything gets really, really muddy. And this is and I'm sure DC Comics, and some of this is paperwork that's just grandfathered in. And even my equity in that character doesn't cover everything. It covers movie tickets, it covers video games, it covers TV shows, it covers toys, it covers t-shirts, it covers all of that in the paperwork. But then when it actually gets into something else, like as far as like trading in it, it can become like a whole different ball game.
So this is a new comic book that you're working on. This is your superhero. So
right. This is a creator-owned thing, right?
So this is your own superhero. Then of course you get all the royalties and you get the whole entire benefits, the whole shebang with this because it's yours. But
right, like I can make an NFT or a 3D model of this, and I own this character. Like I could sell this NFT 100%, and this may be the walk around here. Now, look, this is my second Indiegogo campaign. My first Indiegogo campaign, we crossed $127,000. It's getting ready to ship out next week. This is a physical copy book that people get in the mail. This is my second campaign that I'm going to launch shortly after this one. The other one fulfills. 1,500 people have signed up for this on our mailing list. If you sign up now, you get access to secret tiers and a lenticular card that you only get for signing up. And I'll probably end up like with about, I'm just throwing some numbers here. I mean, maybe I'll end up with 1,500 backers. I'll probably end up with more than that because I had more backers on my first campaign than I did sign up. So I'm just using that as a barometer. I made more money doing my own book than I could work at, at DC Comics. Like, I mean, in a less amount of time, and I own the character 100%. Now I do have to go do YouTube. I do have to, stay in contact with my customer, make sure they're interacting. I see a lot of my people here. Ryan Blue Thunder, big shout out. I have to be up there and shaking hands, kissing babies.
You still got to advertise your own campaign.
Yeah, not just that, but I want to interact with my customers. Like I acknowledge them in the chat. I want to say, hey, how are you? What do you like? How can I make the next campaign better for you? All of these things. Can I sell NFTs of my stuff? Sure. Am I going to? I haven't thought about it like yet. I mean, I really want to see where these markets go. But I know, like, me investing for me in Marvel and DC Comics, as much as I love those characters, the companies really don't have my best interests, and that's the unfortunate truth. And even if, and this is a sad truth, and I hate to say this here, but even if I have like paperwork that says, like, here's a good example. I made a character, Bleeze. She's a Red Lantern chick, has bat wings, very sexy character. She's been in Superhero Girl. She's been in Lego video games. But she was designed to be this, very vixen looking bad guy dominatrix chick. She's been in Justice League Action, all these cartoons. There's a video game out there, never was paid for. I'm having to have a representative talk to the comic company right now, and we're looking back at an audit going back to 2014. I've never been paid for this video game, and the paperwork predates the video game's release and says I'm owed money for the video game. And I mean, that's hard for me to come up with the resources to pay an attorney just to to get the companies to do what they say they'll do on paper. And that's the unfortunate truth with whatever they come up with the NFTs. And I'm not telling anybody not buy NFT. Go buy what you want. Buy the NFTs. I like the ideas of NFTs. They look cool. But creators working on this stuff, you really have to understand, just because a company says they will do something doesn't mean they will do something on paper, because push comes to shove, you're pushing against a brick wall. Like that wall is not going to give. I mean, that they're always going to have more lawyers, more bricks in the wall, and their pockets. I mean, we're talking on staff retainer lawyers, and it's a weirdness that the company issued that statement, but still haven't broken down what creators are getting, even though they're going forward with it. You know, I mean, that's alarming. Nobody's talking about that. They basically.
I can ask you a question regarding that.
Yeah.
Hey man, it's disheartening to hear your experience with DC Comics. Is this an issue that just artists face, or do the writers get the same treatment? Do the writers like Jeff Johns have these same gripes?
Well, I think it's different for Jeff, because Jeff was chief creative officer at DC Comics for years. So
I mean, he's like one of the rock stars. I'm just talking to your regular. No. Snyder, Snyder's a better.
Yeah, probably. I mean, there's a reason James Tynion left Batman, the top selling comic book in the industry. I don't know his real issues, but I can look at that situation and say this creator left the top. When I say the top selling comic, I mean, that's like the staple of DC Comics is Batman. There would be no DC Comics without Batman. Okay. Like that book makes profit to cover the losses on making a Wonder Woman book. I mean, that's just a reality of it. Wonder Woman sells low, Batman sells high, and they get a comic book universe by taking profits from Batman and covering the losses on other books. The reality is the guy left Batman, a 3-year contract on Batman, jumped off a moving train. I mean, you're the top writer in the comic book industry, and we see this with Tom King. Yeah, but we also saw it with Tom King, which we saw how that ended. Yeah. People don't really, but people kind of don't like him now that he's off Batman. That's the thing. Yeah. You're a top writer in the industry. Some of these issues and some of the paperwork, whether I'm a writer or artist, it's the same.
Okay.
With NFTs, it's interesting because they're not reproducing, like with that statue. I'm the only one that was involved. No writer worked with me on that statue. Yeah. Now, should JMS be paid because he worked on Earth One? They'll look at his paperwork and say, this was a special artwork that isn't in the book. So no.
So I don't know if Alpha told you, they're not just making statues. They're going to be making actual entire issues of NFTs where people will actually be able to read them digitally. I don't know if they told you that.
Yeah, I assume that. But I haven't seen any paperwork that tells me the breakdown.
Yeah, well, they're not out yet. Right now, they're just doing statues like the one that we pulled up. Now they're going to be doing entire issues, like the entire issue is an NFT that you can display and actually read. So that's going to become an issue for not just the artist, but for the writer of that comic book.
No, it is. And here's the thing is when we go back to our original work for hire, it breaks down the writer's royalty, the penciler's royalty, the inker's royalty, and then eventually the colorist got a royalty. Now, what's interesting is when eventually the colorist got a royalty for a comic being reproduced, the only thing they did is take 0.5% away from the inker and give it to the colorist. Like the companies, even when they look like, oh, we're so progressive, we're going to give, and we're so revolutionary, we're going to be so good to give colorists, go work at our company versus our competitor, we'll give our colorist royalty. When that happened, which was like I think 2000s, early 2000s, maybe mid 2000s, or maybe 2010. I don't know. These dates when that happened is the point. They were taking literally away from another creator, though, rather than the company. When you add all these percentages up, like the company's taking probably 90% of the profit from the book. They could have easily took 1% and gave to the colorist without taking away from an inker. So like the reality is these percentages are all lined up. Now, should they go to NFTs and should NFTs be reevaluated as a higher percentage? I don't know. But going back to the original story I said with the Death of Captain Marvel thing, according to Jim Starlin, who was part of that committee with Jim Shooter, those weren't reevaluated when they went into a graphic novel. They just said, we already established these percentages. They worked over here for this one magazine comic we did, not even a graphic novel. We're just going to yank that percentage and travel over into graphic novels. Now, at first, that was probably fine, but those royalties, that breakdown in percentage probably doesn't work when half our comics, let's just say half for argument's sake. I don't really know the numbers right now because the comic sales are super low right now in the industry. But let's say if it was 50-50, half the revenue in comics were from single issues and half the revenue was from graphic novels. Even if I'm getting what at one time looked like a fair, like, just some gravy money on graphic novels. If the graphic novels are ingesting my single issues, I have to cross, like, say 40,000 copies just to make a nickel royalty on a comic. If those start to ingest, if the graphic novels rise and the singles like go down on the barometer, then these are ingesting these, and I'm losing money, potential money on the singles, to not really make a fair amount on graphic novels. And that's the real issue here, is like, and this is where I was talking about whenever new technology is introduced to the system and nobody stops and reevaluates, like, it's an ecosystem. And like, going back to just the ecosystem of it, it'll affect retailers on some level, just like retailers were afraid digital would affect their brick and mortar stores. Or just like how Amazon, like I brought up earlier, that they couldn't compete with Amazon selling trades. So the comic industry is very delicate. It's delicate towards the creators and how they're paid, and it's delicate towards the people that own brick and mortar stores.
So Shane, I want to get more
Todd McFarlane about these issues, because I mean, it almost sounds like a similar story why he broke away and founded Image Comics on his own.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was it. Those guys, and that was a big thing in comics, is they really were, about creator rights, but they were also jumping at, again, kind of like the Tinian situation, but different. Those guys were making like crazy $60,000, $80,000 royalties on single issues of comics. I mean, they had a big, healthy bank account when they jumped off. Todd McFarlane just had record sales on Spider-Man. Rob Liefeld, record sales on X-Force #1 and things like that. They had money to take those risks that they did with, so it was a different situation. Whereas the comic industry right now and the creators are in the opposite situation. They're actually at a point where the sales are at an all-time low. The rates have been cut. These companies are really trying to downsize and cut to the bone and cut rates, and they're not making royalties because nothing's selling high enough really to make royalties, and they're going. So it's really for there to be any type of big revolution in the comic book industry. At least for me, crowdfunding has been that, because I'm able to go. Basically offer people the opportunity to pre-order a book from me, and directly from me. And I don't really have middlemen besides a small percentage Indiegogo takes. Now I have to do more work. I'll be honest, doing crowdfunding work, if you do it correctly, is a lot more work than doing just work for hire stuff at Marvel and DC. But again, like, I own everything. I control everything. I own the copyright to everything. If I want to get into NFTs and sell NFTs of my comic one day, I don't have to ask anybody. I don't have to get permission from Marvel or DC to do it.
I think it's way better just to build your own brand, honestly.
Yeah, no, it is.
Are going to give you, the NFTs are going to give you that power, Your name is already pretty well known as an artist. So launching your own NFT collectible or your own comic book, as you're doing now, I think it's just really going to be the way. Since doesn't look like there's much money to be made with DC Comics and Marvel in the long run, because there's no royalties,
right?
As much as they are getting paid.
Well, my fear with the NFT thing, going back to the royalty, is they're just going to carry over the already established royalties for graphic novels, and this is where my biggest issue is that we keep moving forward and going back to that Death of Captain Marvel thing with just keeping a comic on the stand longer than 1 month. Is nobody's ever stopped and said, hey, we need to reevaluate our royalty system because it's not in tune with the market. And the biggest example I saw of this, and I was working with Michael Green on Superman Batman, and he was working on a TV show called Heroes. I don't know if you guys remember that show or not. The cheerleader girl. Nobody remembers the show Heroes. No. It was like these random dudes with superpowers, but they were.
I remember. Yeah.
Okay, now you remember.
Yeah, I remember. Right. Of course. Yeah.
Okay. So there was the cheerleader girl, and everybody had these superpowers. It was really big at the time. Even Jeff Loeb was working on it and stuff like that.
Hayden Panettiere, I think, the same show.
Yeah.
There you go.
So the deal with that show is, and why I bring it up is, there was a big writer's strike in Hollywood. There was a lot of the things they were on strike for in Hollywood was they weren't really being compensated, I don't think, for DVD collections or even buying the episodes. Like all of their TV deals were done for actual, like they were dinosaur deals back when you're talking about ratings and ad revenue and things like this, when I was literally downloading and watching and paying and buying the episodes of Heroes like on Amazon, or Apple or some iTunes or something like that. So like they went on strike and they renegotiated their agreements. And like, I don't know if the comic book industry, and this is going into the NFT, I think it's unfair to take the already established royalty system and just keep reusing it for new technology that maybe that royalty system isn't in sync with. Now, is there ever going to be a strike that causes the companies to reevaluate this stuff? Not really. Probably not, because a lot of people are afraid they won't be hired by Marvel and DC if there is a strike. So, it's kind of a, whatever situation.
So, Shane,
sorry, dude.
Yeah. Now that we got your perspective, right? I want to go more into NFTs because we're already an hour into the stream.
Sorry about it. Sorry.
Right? Yeah, that's fine because we're learning a lot right now from you. We're seeing how the other side works, right? But looking at this, well, with what you're saying, you can't randomly make your own Batman and sell it, right? It has to go through this comic. But if it's your own superhero, you can. So
with that, people hire us at a Comic-Con to do a sketch, and we do like a Batman sketch, and we take money for it. But technically, if DC Comics ever wanted to stop that, or Marvel Comics wanted to stop that, they could. They have always been able to. Just so you know, that is established. The reason they don't is because they don't want to pay comic book people to go to a convention, and we're not going to go unless we can cover our plane tickets and stuff and hotel stays. So they know we'll make it up like that, and then the comic thing helps your brand. So we're not actually supposed to be able to reproduce Batman.
Okay. And the reason why I'm asking is because there's a lot of NFTs out there, right? For example, you have this Batman versus Batman Who Laughs. You have this sketch right here of Batman. And all of these sketches right here down below, would you say that these NFTs could be taken down due to copyright infringement, right? As these are individual, really people that are doing these NFTs.
So yes, there was a similar situation with a crowdfunded book I did a video on, because it was blatantly a ripoff of Batman, and it was on Kickstarter. So I did a video on it, just kind of pointing out, like, good for you, somebody selling Batman that not DC Comics. Kickstarter took it down. So yeah, basically, whether DC acts or the company itself, usually sites, and again, I'm not unfamiliar with the site you're on, but usually a site will kind of govern this themselves because they don't want DC Comics knocking at their door.
Okay. And that's what I figured, that there is a lot of copyright violations right now going on with NFTs when it comes to superheroes. And this is one of the reasons why I like VeVe, because they're actually already licensed by DC Comics, by Marvel. And that's why I see VeVe really overtaking these other NFTs that just random creators are doing, right? Because it could come to a point where DC Comics and Marvel is going to go ahead and crack down. So that's why I wanted to get your perspective as well when it came to those NFTs that we're seeing on these marketplaces. So answer my question pretty much.
You're definitely at the prejudice of the company acting on it. Now, I'm sure a lot of this stuff you'll see disappear the more active DC Comics is in with this. Especially the site you're talking about, VeVe. Like, if they did a deal with them, I would expect a lot of this stuff. This is gonna, I mean, if the legal people were coming after us, the comic creators, they're gonna go after these people, with a cease and desist eventually. Now, I don't know, like, again, this OpenSeas thing, like, I don't know if they'll just go to this platform and say, we're telling you as a platform, you're liable for what you're doing. Like, I don't know. Is that a platform, OpenSeas?
Yeah, it's a platform. It's a marketplace where you could actually put your artwork.
So
you mint it into the blockchain and they could sell it.
What'll happen is DC Comics will just go to that platform and tell them they're in violation of their copyright, and it'll be up to that platform to take those things down. Okay. I mean, that's kind of the unfortunate truth on that. Now there's certain creators that people look the other way on. Like, I've seen certain creators do art books, crowdfunding. Like, there was that Batman book that were from some kids that were knocking off Batman that got taken down. He had a different name, but obviously looked just like Batman, and it got taken down off the Kickstarter. But then there's other comic creators I've seen that they're putting together what they call on Kickstarter, what they call their collections of their artwork, which have already been reproduced by DC, and they're calling them like sketchbooks, but they're literally like pages from Green Lantern, pages from Star Wars, pages from this, and the companies aren't taking them down. So I don't know if it's people. There's certain people they look the other way on, but these are people that actually do work for Marvel and DC also. So I don't know if like they're granted an allowance. Me myself, I'm not trying to do a Shane Davis artwork with art from Marvel and DC Comics and put up on a crowdfund. I just, once I got the letter from DC Comics, I wasn't thinking about doing NFTs really anymore. Of my previous originals, and again, that's that whole muddy area of like who owns the reproduction of these characters and stuff. I mean, the NFTs look really sweet. I know there was like a Bozeman NFT that sold for a crazy amount, right? That was was it the Oscars?
I'm not sure. I know there was a high value NFTs like Beepo, that he had an image of Trump, and that sold for millions of dollars. But yeah, there's been many NFTs that they've been selling for crazy amount of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And right now, what you were looking at is the VeVe NFT, the Spider-Man, which is actually augmented reality NFT. Which they're actually officially licensed, and this is why I think that these collectibles are actually going to go up more in value, because they're actually the first officially licensed Marvel NFT. So I see that, along with the one-of-a-kind artwork that you guys do, will also be very, very valuable once minted as an NFT.
So there's actually been an uptick in original artwork value ever since like the shutdown and stuff for some reason. And a lot of people, because the market's been good, I guess people trying to tie up and invest in original like artwork. There's been like all this Frank Miller Sin City artwork and Daredevil artwork coming out. A lot of people are trading it, and I guess people are trying to tie up, their currency, their money, into things that they will hold value. And it's funny because the original artwork market's going up the same time the NFT thing's taking off. I don't know that type of animation you're showing me and stuff, and I understand the NFT behind it, and I get it. It's cool. I don't know, when you're talking about the original artwork market, I don't know which one holds value more. Like, or like when with the Adam Kubert thing, he's selling the original board with the NFT. I mean, you're getting both. You're covering both bases, right? So I don't know. Like, I'm actually kind of curious about this. This is a Todd McFarlane, I think, Batman.
That's it. Yeah, Todd McFarlane, right. Batman. That's an iconic NFT on VeVe, Shane.
Yeah, this was a cover of his originally, and I think there was a girl there. So
Yeah,
it's like they
yeah,
basically took the
he's talking a
girl
girl on the
out.
comic.
Yeah, and it was I think it was supposed to be a Batman black and white statue, and obviously now
Yeah,
it's
the black and white statues, yes. And as you see, these right now, the minimum, these Todd McFarlane's, a total of how much was it? Was it 10,000 of these that were released? Comic
Yeah,
Way, do you know?
7,500.
7,500. 7,500 of these were reproduced, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the floor price for this is going right now at a minimum of $550. You see the gems on it, but it's actually $550, the minimum floor price for these NFTs right now of these Todd McFarlane collection.
Hey, Shane, cool thing. That's actually the first NFT on VeVe too. So Todd McFarlane's Batman is not only the first appearance of Batman as an NFT, but also the first ever NFT on this platform.
Now, here's the interesting thing with the Todd McFarlane thing. I don't know if you're going to say this guy got paid and this guy didn't. Like, that's Mike Mignola's? Did Mike Mignola get paid? I would say Todd McFarlane gets paid before Mike Mignola, mainly because McFarlane Toys has the license to the DC Comics action figures that are in Walmarts and stuff now. So I'm not saying there's like special cases, but there probably are special cases. Like I assume Todd McFarlane's probably happy with his payment on the NFT of this Batman. But maybe, and I'm giving, again, DC Comics benefit of the doubt here. I just haven't heard about the payment for this because I didn't do a Batman black and white statue. Maybe all these creators from the Batman black and whites, they've gotten some type of statement or breakdown on how they'll be compensated for this. I don't know. I hate to, but that's me giving DC Comics the benefit of the doubt. Once they go into the comics, if I still haven't had a breakdown from DC Comics how I'm being compensated, then it's, to me, it's kind of fishy.
Hey, Alpha, let's ask Shane a good question. Now that you brought up the Spider-Man NFT. That Spider-Man NFT, did you see that one, Shane? The one that Alpha brought up? That's the only NFT so far on this platform that's not tied to an artist. It's the first ever superhero not tied to an artist. And after everything you've been telling us, my head's like spinning in circles now. Do you think Marvel is deciding to just go with the NFT without tying it to an artist so they don't have to have these muddy waters of paying the artist their royalty or their
Well, there's that. I mean, but even with the licensing artwork, which I kind of worked in DC Comics, but Marvel, like whenever you go into the grocery store and you see like those Avengers like grapes or whatever, or sandwich bags or things like that, the products on food is usually not lifted from the comics. That's usually a division that hires a specific artist. And is that a Kenneth Roquefort Superman?
Yeah, that's the one. Yep, that's exactly the Superman.
Yeah, so I'll probably have my NFT.
Superman on VeVe, the only Superman. So I mean, let's say they released your Superman next week, it would be the second ever Superman on VeVe.
Well, I haven't had a statement from DC Comics saying how these things will be paid, and I'm actually friends with Kenneth Roquefort. I could actually, not now, but I could actually ask him if if this came to his attention or is DC Comics paying him for it. But
ask him, because this Superman's a big deal for us in the NFT world. This is Superman's first appearance in NFT form, so the fact that they took his work and made it the first ever, this will go down in history as the first appearance of Superman as an NFT. So I don't know if you know if he's aware, but I mean, this is a big deal, kind of like the McFarlane Batman.
Yeah, I'm actually friends with Kenneth. I'll hit him up now. I might get an answer while we're on stream.
Yeah, I love this piece. I'm telling you, this image of Superman is nothing short of legendary for us on the VeVe platform. But yeah, Alpha, you knew that, right? That this Spider-Man, it's not tied to any artist.
I had read that and I forgot it. Yeah, there was actually no artist.
Now that talking to Shane and he's telling us all these things that go on behind the scenes, it's really making me think why they don't have an artist tied to this Spider-Man.
The issue, it goes right back to the Batman black and white, right? If they tie it to an artist, then they can sell. That's the difference between selling one Batman and selling 50 Batmans.
Exactly.
That was the whole Batman black and white business model there. I was friends with Mark Chiarello, the art director, who basically, made the Batman black and white, the comic anyways. And that kind of built that whole franchise, because that's what it started off being built off of. It was all the artists that with unique styles that worked on Batman Black and White. That's the safest bet for Marvel. Now once they if they don't go the artist route, then they're stuck with different Spider-Mans, right? Like all the different costumes.
Yeah.
You have, of course, Spider-Man in the black suit. You'd have Spider-Man Miles Morales. You'd have the Scarlet Spider character, just like basically all the DLC characters you get from that's a Jim Lee
Nightwing
from
there.
Hush, yeah.
From Hush, exactly. From Batman 619 cover.
The one thing I will say about this is because of digital printing and with statues and everything, I think they kind of already had these models on hand to some extent. Like I kind of want to feel that way about it.
Hey,
I may be wrong.
What's your favorite character you created for DC Comics? Like kind of like Rob Liefeld created Deadpool. What is your top character that you personally created for DC Comics?
Dexter.
Okay, so if they made an NFT of Dexar, a statue of Dexar that we get on DC Comics, they owe you money for that, right?
Due to my equity agreement. But also due to my equity agreement, they owe me for a video game I've yet to be paid on. The equity agreement actually says so, but that's the difference. If I, again, if
you have that agreement, okay.
Yeah, if you have the agreement for creating that character, then I'm owed a percentage on however they trade that character. According to the agreement, if they honor it or not, that's different. But according to the wording in the agreement, yeah. Now if I can't own Batman or my Superman. Like if my Superman ends up there, I'm not.
Okay, because at some point, if VeVe is successful, we're going to see every single DC character at some point, including the one you created, Dexar. If that day comes, I'm actually curious to see how that even plays out. Because you created the character. It's like kind of how Rob Liefeld created Deadpool. You're owed every right that comes with that character.
Well, that's the thing. I'm sure Rob Liefeld, he's getting, because there was even a time. This is so tricky. There was you'd really have to be a Marvel fan to remember this, but they actually, I think Cable and Deadpool, they owe Rob money whenever they use those characters, right? So they actually, there was one year that they were like, let's use these characters, but let's change their names. So I think.
That's badass Dexter, man. That's a cool character, man. That's a cool little character.
That would be cool on the VeVe app. That would look pretty cool.
So they actually took Deadpool and changed his name to Weapon X and changed his costume, and took Cable and changed him to Soldier X and got rid of his costume. And they were just trying to knock Rob out of money, basically. And it didn't work. And people wanted Deadpool, and they wanted Deadpool in his costume, and they didn't. So they ended up going right back. So that kind of tells me they owe Rob money. So if there's a Deadpool NFT, I'm sure Rob's getting paid.
Oh, absolutely. What's funny about Deadpool? Deadpool's kind of like a goof spinoff of Deathstroke. Wade Wilson, Slade Wilson.
Yeah. And look, if he's able to make money off of DC, make your money. If you took it to Marvel and made it better, make your money. I'm all for creators getting paid. I mean, but I'm also a creator. But even as a fan, I looked up to the Image guys a lot for going off and making their own thing. I was sad to see Todd McFarlane leave Spider-Man. Todd McFarlane's Torment run was like one of my all-time favorite comic book runs.
Absolutely.
But,
one of the best Spider-Man runs of all time.
But as a fan, I gladly followed them onto Spawn. I gladly followed Jim Lee onto Wildcats and Rob Liefeld onto Youngblood and, Eric Larson on the Savage Dragon at the time. Now, some of these books some were great, some weren't. And it's funny, we're seeing a big resurgence in Spawn right now. Like Spawn's actually like one of the biggest selling comics right now in the American comic book industry. And I think it's partially due to there being a retro type thing going on of the 90s right now, and it's becoming very fashionable. Just 90s stuff in general is now before it was the 80s was like a cool retro thing, and now it's the 90s is kind of coming around in fashion and stuff like that. But honestly, I just think Spawn's a really cool character. He's doing the Spawn verse right now. So we'll see how that works out. I wish Todd all the luck in that. We call him the Todd Father.
The Todd Father, I love that. So this right here, Shane, believe it or not, this is the most expensive comic book related NFT on the entire VeVe platform, the Steve Pugh Harley Quinn. It's the most limited and the most expensive comic related NFT on the entire app.
So the NFT having a limited run, that automatically shoots the value up, I take it?
Yeah, so this one's the most short printed one. Only 500 were made. So, I mean, I don't think we'll ever see mint numbers like those again. So that's what makes this one so desirable.
I wonder if DC Comics are leading with this rather than the comics, because they don't really understand the market enough to see like the base, like the interest and what they're like in boxing. There's a term, it's called a probing jab. It's like basically you're just trying to measure distance between you and your opponent and stuff. Like I don't know if like they're using some of these the Batman black and white stuff. Like of course that pug one is not the coolest looking Harley. I mean that's, you know, an opinion, but you know, like they're kind of gauging interest, you know, before they start doing NFTs of actual comics, like because they don't know the runs, right? Like I mean, should they produce more or less? You know,
so I'll give an example.
what's the market?
Batman Who Laughs was a very popular character. And I think Snyder, he should be getting a cut because he created that character. So since that was such a popular character, they made a ton of them. They made 16,000 of them for that reason, so more people could buy them. So, and then the Magnola from that same set was, I guess, seen as the less popular one. So they made a less amount of Magnolas. So, you know, so it could also sell out.
Well, it's funny because I have the Batman black and white statues. Like I bought them as they were coming out, and the Magnola statues sold out right away.
Absolutely, the Magnola one's a popular one, so I was surprised they did that.
Well, it was so popular that they had to recolor it just to sell it again. Like they literally changed the shadows on it and repainted it just to have a second swing at making that Magnola money on the Batman black and white statue. So it's funny to see that. I guess from what you're saying, it's interesting to see the actual statue market sales don't really reflect in the NFT sales. And if I was DC Comics, I would be a little concerned by that. Am I charging the right amount? Am I making a limited? Am I doing my quantities correct? You know, like and that's the thing. You know, like when you like the people that like webtoons, people that read web comics is a different type of audience, you know, like it might not be the guys from the comic shop, and you know, maybe somebody just likes the look of that Harley and they don't really care about the artist attached to it. Maybe they don't actually read comics, you know. It's stuff like that. These are all factors. Like maybe somebody just likes the pose of one of these Batmans and not even the artist that's attached to it, you know. Like I know I like the Alex Ross Batman black and white statue a lot.
Oh yeah, the one where he's sitting on the throne.
No, it's just him with the cape over his shoulders. It's just an Alex Ross type pose. Yeah, somebody may like that just because of the cool cape design. You know, it's interesting to see what's here and what's not. That to me,
McFarlane one's cool because the way McFarlane draws Batman's cape, it has a very Spawn-like feel to it. Yeah, it almost looks like Spawn's cape.
Yeah.
So believe it or not, the Rizzo Batman is the most expensive Batman on this app. It's the most popular and the most expensive Batman on the entire app. So I don't know if Rizzo even is aware that his Batman is an icon here on VeVe. It's the first ultra rare to ever come out. Only 1750 were made.
The Todd McFarlane and the Rizzo is the top Batmans.
Yeah, so Todd McFarlane for the fact that he's the first ever product on the app, the first appearance of Batman. However, the Rizzo is the most expensive one because he's the first ultra rare Batman ever made. This is the hardest piece to acquire to complete the first Batman set.
So my question to you, Shane, the comic book world, is it dead? Are comic books dead? And do you think something like NFTs or what you're seeing right now could actually reignite that, right? The same way that you're making your superheroes, right? Your Inglorious Rex.
Right.
Now that graphic novels could deal with piracy, but now that you could actually sell your comic books and put them on a blockchain, you think that could actually reignite the comic book world, if the comic book world is even dead? Because even me growing up, you know, I was born in the 90s, I was raised in the 90s, but I wasn't really raised with many comic book stores around me, and especially now I can't even tell you one comic book store near me.
So because I've seen, all right, so that's a tricky question. I think there's hope in anything, right? I think if digital should have been big in 2010. It should have been huge. It should have, found new readers. And I think it did, but through piracy and it probably in the end only hurt profits, because if you're reading it for free, you don't have to, whatever. Right. And what I like about the NFTs, especially the comic side of NFTs, is it kind of makes a collectible. And that's something that, with comics being healthy, they've always been considered collectible, whether or not they really retain the value. When people were buying all of those Jim Lee #1, X-Men #1s, people thought they retained value and they were collectible. X-Men #1, for people that don't know, if you go look it up, it had I think 5 covers. It sold the record number of comics, but it also had 5 covers to the same comic that you had to connect to get one image of the X-Men. So, of course, people were buying that book ×4, and they were happily doing it because it was a great work of art. The book was brilliant. It looked drawn like a MFer. It made a nice poster for you as a kid, and it was collectible. So I think there's room to grow comics as long as there's a collectible market. I do like that aspect of the NFT. Will it save the comic book market? It can only help the bottom line with the corporation, because you have to understand, Marvel and DC Comics have corporate overlords that are looking at them like, why do we keep you around? Research and development. Marvel's getting ready to go into, what is it, like phase 4, and they're kind of telling, they're Kevin Feige's on record saying we maybe don't need the source material as much anymore going forward. Maybe we can kind of make the not Inhumans, but the Eternals, whatever we want it to be. Nobody even knows what the Eternals comic book was. There's Shang-Chi, things like this. They kind of feel like they can just kind of operate without the comics. So Disney's going to constantly look at Marvel Comics and say, you guys are losing money every month. Why are we keeping you around if we're not even really dependent on you to make source material anymore? If the comic industry, at least Marvel and DC on the corporate side, are able to juvenate money through NFT and look more profitable, it is healthy for Marvel and DC to stay alive. Is that great for the whole comic book industry in general? There's so many factors. There's the creators, and then there's the retailers. Now, could we get around the retailers? I'd like the idea that there's a coding that it's a collectible versus just a digital comic that ends up on a pirated site somewhere. I don't understand.
I think NFT comics can actually save it, because right now with the digital world, you got a lot of free websites that give you free comic books. I mean, a lot of people have pirated comics. I mean, the whole digital age is pirated comics. NFT comics can't be replicated because of the blockchain. So I think that will kind of stop all these free comics being given out online.
It could be a solution to the problem.
Exactly.
It could be. And I think Marvel and DC, if they were smart, they would run as quick as they can and abandon digital altogether. I'm talking dump Comixology, which is going to be hard for them to do because it's owned by Amazon and they depend on Amazon to sell a lot of their trades. You have to understand that.
Yeah, because Shane, when you own a digital comic, let's say on your Kindle or just in any online file, you don't really own the comic book. If you own the NFT comic book, like the ones that VeVe is going to come out, that's actually your digital asset. You own it. It can go up in value over time. So I think that could be a solution to that problem.
And that's one thing, and this is me not talking as a creator, but talking as a comic book fan. I actually like that aspect of NFTs because, I remember buying comics, and I remember buying Spider-Man Torment, reading it and needing more money for new comics and going and trading my set in of Torment 1 through 5 for store credit so I could buy new comics, and I actually got more than I paid for it. Yeah. And that sometimes when you're buying a comic book as a fan and you're wanting to read, maybe I'm wasting money. That's always in the back of your head. Maybe this is a bad comic. Maybe the story will be bad in the end when I get to issue 4 or 5 or whatever. Am I wasting money? But if a comic book can have value, I think it does open people's wallets a little bit more to buy and read and sample, because you feel like you're not just throwing money away. And that's the problem right now in the American comic book industry, unfortunately, and why you're probably seeing less and marginalized comic book shops is there's a slew of comics that are really not good comics. And the companies are putting them out on limited art budget. Half the people there on those Batman and Superman statues, DC Comics isn't like paying Kenneth Rocafort to draw for them because they've cut the budget and they can't afford Kenneth Rocafort. So I mean, like people can't even buy that type of comic. If they can buy that in NFT form, good, maybe they'll juvenate more money. And having a new market like this where something looking cool is going to dictate whether people are buying it or not is great. What I would fear if I was an NFT buying customer is the minute that these companies start giving you what I consider trash comics. And they just make it limited, and they try to make it worth something by just making it limited, but it's not a good comic. And that's
everything's serial numbered. I don't know if Alpha told you, all these comics, they're all serial numbered too.
Right. And well, I understand the numbering part because that's a big deal in statue collecting is if you get a low number or whatnot. And I kind of understand it. And a lot of this NFT thing is very akin to like the statue market. The issue is like, will the companies try to take advantage of the system? You know, will they give you a cool looking Superman and that dictate the price, or will they say this is a bad looking Superman NFT, but it's so limited that it's of value? And that's where it gets the problem with that, and that goes with any market, whether it's a toy market, whether it's a statue market, is the person controlling that, the company controlling that can blow their market if they're not responsible with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
like
totally.
DC will have a responsibility. Marvel will have a responsibility that they're just not trying to game the system, so to speak, and make a limited edition of something and shoot the price up, but it not be good. Like, you know, either whether it's a good book or a good looking NFT.
So that's what sucks with serial numbers, because if they took like you said, a trash comic or a trash statue, but they limit it to like 100 copies, it's gonna be worth thousands, man. Like I'm talking like 10,000.
No, I know. Yeah, I know. But that's always been the case with anything. Like they can take a trash toy and call it a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive, and it'd be a limited, and then it's a $500 figure. You know, it's a supply and demand thing. They can limit the supply, and all of a sudden the price shoots up. And again, like I hope. Like, and keep in mind, Marvel and DC Comics has years and years of experience dealing with collectibles, so they should actually know this more than anybody, you know, how to navigate a collectible market in theory. But as we're seeing today in the American comic book market, they aren't doing that. Instead, like, sales are plummeting as manga is rising. Like, we're literally losing customers. I've done videos about this on my channel, but we've done sales analysis and everything, but like the manga is growing and the American single issues are shrinking, and even the graphic novels are shrinking. And it's literally these people are turning from the right side of the shelf and looking at manga and just going to manga. And that's happening right now at an accelerated rate this last year. And I've been reporting about it for probably 6 months at least. So they understand the collectible market. They understand what people want. They understand so much. They know to take a Kenneth Rocafort Superman to roll out. They know to, have an Eduardo Rizzo Batman. They know to have a Brian Boland Penguin. I mean, I know it because I recognize it. I understand that that's a cool artist that drew this penguin one time or whatever. And they understand that that stuff's good. Now, will they understand to reproduce stuff that is of same quality going forward? Because all that stuff you were showing me, all those artworks, all those statues, they're like 10 years old, maybe older.
Oh, they're old. A lot of them are old.
Yeah, a lot of them are old artwork.
I don't know if you do, but Brian Boland, they had to fix his name. They messed up his name when they originally released it. They called him Brian Bollard with an R. Did you know that?
That's insane.
Yeah, it said Brian Bollard, Bollard instead of Boland. And I knew it was Boland. It was kind of like a big stink, so they had to fix it. They went back and fixed the Brian Boland, because Brian Boland's another legendary artist from the 90s. So I mean, the fact that they messed that up was crazy.
And keep in mind, I've seen a lot of collectible markets in my time. I'm talking about Beanie Babies crash, baseball cards crash. You know, the cards was a big thing at one time in the 90s. I mean, baseball cards were huge, like stores on every corner. And what I'm going to say is true. It's like, it's really up to those companies not blowing that system and that interest and that base. I think any collectible is possible. And I think even more so with NFTs and comics, because it's something you can read, it's limited, it has a value. And comics, even right now in the American comic book industry, the old back issue market is shooting through the roof. More retailers are actually divesting of buying new comics, and they're just trading in old back issues now. Why? Because they understand the value of a George Perez Teen Titans run, because they understand like something like that. So I'm just bringing this up. It's all relative to this, and I'm seeing it with DC Comics. They do understand the value of Todd McFarlane Batman, of Brian Boland Penguin. They do understand the value of that. It's just that's why they're pulling from their backlist of 10 years. The stuff they're producing now, they're not putting in that type of work. Like they could have a Kenneth Rocafort Superman run right now if they wanted, and that could be a new NFT, but they're not doing that. So that's what's concerning me, is what's the new material that the companies are going to put up in NFT and try to sell. And you know, that's a little concerning to me, is where the companies go with that. But the good news for people buying in NFTs, and this is the good news for people buying and trading and collecting back issues now, is you understand the value of that old stuff. You understand the value of Todd McFarlane on Spider-Man. So if there's a Todd McFarlane Spider-Man NFT, of course, buy that, because there is a marker for value in that NFT. There's a reference. I personally, I like it. I'm more worried about the people in charge of DC Comics today and the material they've been putting out, and Marvel Comics today and the material they've been putting out. I mean, I know maybe you guys keep up with comic news or not, but I mean, if they're making like I'm Not Starfire NFT, I mean, I'm not interested in that. If they're making George Perez Starfire, I'm interested in that. If they're making
Starfire they made on VeVe is actually the DC Bombshells version, where she's kind of like a firefighter from the 1940s. That's the one they have right now.
Right, but there's been a big blowout over this book they put out, I'm Not Starfire, which is like a goth chick that hates Starfire. That's her mom, and everybody's done videos about it. That's not going to do well on NFT. And there was another case where Marvel had a book called New Warriors, where everybody was making fun of it with Safe Space and Snowflake. Nobody's going to buy an NFT of that.
Okay.
You
know, do you think comics have gotten more political in the last couple of years?
Absolutely. And that stuff isn't going to help a collector's market, because in the end, if somebody's going to buy an NFT of Batman, you want a cool looking MFing Batman. You're not going to want like a politically correct NFT Batman. You know, like, and a lot of this stuff is character based too. So it's like, I just hope the people in charge recognize this as they navigate this new collectible field. I think they do, though. With the stuff I'm seeing, I do think they understand that. They're leading the right foot forward. You know, they're taking the right step. Cool looking Batman, cool looking Spider-Man. You know, it's just going to be interesting to see the comic material.
Yeah,
and
well, Batman is Rizzo and McFarlane. I mean, I don't think you get more badass looking than Rizzo and McFarlane.
No, you don't. But when they start trading in the comics, that's where it's going to be interesting, because they basically have two sets of comics right now. The stuff that isn't selling right now, that we're losing our audience to manga, which is not politically correct. And there's actual issues with them being censored here. And they're now handling their own material and their own translations because they don't want to be censored.
I don't even think manga is that good about censoring. Manga comics, to my opinion, are they're more
no. We're trying to censor manga.
Okay.
We're not them. They're translating their own stuff because they don't want us messing. They don't want us messing with. Yeah, they don't want us messing with their material like we've corrupted our material.
I'm guessing it's like Attack on Titan. That's a violent manga. So the ones we get, that's a super censored version of that.
No, it's got to do with like girls' cup sizes and stuff. Do they look too sexy?
Wow.
Wording, stuff like that. Things that are different in Japan than they are here. And, and not trying to get into all that, but the base is there's two type of comics. The comics we're making today that we're losing our audience to, and then the comics that are our backlist that people in comic shops are actually trading in and paying their bills with, which is like the stuff from the 90s, the stuff from the 2000s, even the early mid 2000s is still trading and selling well. Things like Jim Lee's JLA, Batman Hush, things like that are really cool. That stuff, great NFTs, all great investments. I would say going forward in any comic, if you can see that comic run has an eBay value, like people are trading in it, or it's popping up in the search engine, that's a hit. It's what we call in the comic industry an evergreen. These are the NFT comics that are probably going to hold value and stay evergreen, and you're going to want to buy in if I was an investor, because these are the same books people are trying to buy now in single issues, and even historic runs. If you look at like Teen Titans Judas Contract, or things like that by Marv Wolfman and George Perez, or Infinity Gauntlet by Perez and Jim Starlin, things like that. They do NFTs of that. I mean, that's money all day long, and especially if somebody says first appearance of Deadpool, and like New Mutants. I don't know the number, but Rob Liefeld, New Mutants, that's money. NFT, that's money. First appearances, that's going to be money, but you need to know those issues off the street, because they may advertise it. Hey, this is the first appearance of this character of Taskmaster, right? Those are the key issues in the comic industry that have been shooting up. Is first appearances of Black Panther, first appearance of any of these characters that pop up in the Marvel Cinematic Universe or on the TV show or something like that. And you really have to have your ear to the ground on that stuff to recognize those coming along. I do think the companies will understand that, and they will try to profit off that.
It's the same way as VeVe, because yes, when it is a first appearance, people jump on it. So it's a very same thing that you're seeing out in the street, just coming into a digital world of NFTs.
Yeah,
you're exactly on the right track.
And I think, like, if I'm just talking about investment tips, and I'm just talking from a collector's perspective, because I have key issues. Like, I have the first appearance of Rocket Raccoon, I have the first appearance of Vision and Ultron. I go track these things down whenever I know these characters are going to pop up in something. Of course, Walking Dead was a great example, right? It printed like 9,000 copies at the height. I think that number one graded 9.8. 9.8 is CGC graded the highest grade you can get. That's basically a 10.
That's what I collect, man. New Mutants 98 at 9.8, Batman Adventures 12, 9.8. That's what I collect. That's all everybody always collect 9.8. Like, all the others is trash. They printed too many of them.
But Walking Dead, number one, was a book that really was close to cancellation. Not number one, but later on. Like, it wasn't selling big. 9,000 print run. Okay, like, the reason that comic was like a $30,000 comic or something like that was because it had a limited print run.
Exactly.
With this, again, it's the same. It's same stuff in the collector's market. If they make like a Hush number one variant, but maybe there's only like 100 of them made. I mean, how much is that going to go for? And that this is what gets interesting, is like they can do cover variants, right? So there could be a Hush with this cover, a Hush with that cover, and they do that now in the comic industry. They'll get like an Art Germ cover and a random cover of his. Maybe a retailer has to order 50 copies to get one copy of the Art Germ cover, and automatically that one cover is worth like maybe anywhere between $50 to $100 right out the box. Still has a cover price of $3.99. So this collector's market for limited comics exists, and I would tell people to understand, like, do your research and keep what's been driving up in elite when these comics come available. First appearances of characters, especially popular characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, have been big. In the DC Universe, all those are big, especially if they've had movie appearances or screen time. Those are big. Of course, probably buying the first appearance of Superman is going to be impossible. You know, if they do an Action Comics #1, considering I think Action Comics #1 recently traded for around $3 million, if they ever do Action Comics #1, I assume DC's, I don't know how they're going to handle it, but at that point they're dealing with big boys and trading. You know, like I don't know how they would handle that. They can't make 1,000 of those. I wouldn't think they would. I don't know how they would handle that, to be honest. And that I think that's the big game here for these guys is once they start cracking into these issues, and they're going to sample it and they're going to gauge the market. But eventually, I think DC Comics is going to go. They're going to go for the jugular on this, and they're going to go for these big key issues that they can see they trade for $3 million. So what can we get out of it? You know.
Yeah, but Shane, it's been a hell of a stream, man.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I went a little crazy with you guys on some of this stuff.
No, Shane, it was an honor to hear you, man. Like honestly, like I couldn't believe it, man. Like, because I mean, I love your work. I love artists, love writers, but you don't hear about this stuff at all. Like, I mean, for all we know, the artists and the writers could be getting screwed, and like I was clueless about it. I had no clue. Like, you hear about the Todd McFarlane stories, but hearing your first hand account is awesome, man. So thank you for telling us about that.
And if you guys can, thank you for bringing this up. Please go subscribe to my YouTube channel, Talking and Drawing with Shane Davis. We talk about pop culture stuff, comic news, and things like that. So I'd love to see you guys over there. Help me out. And guys, really thanks for having me on. And if you guys want to get in on the next big thing in Glorious Rex up on Indiegogo, the sign up is live. We will be launching in 2 to 3 weeks. So if you sign up, you will get a limited edition lenticular card that is like a hologram where it changes characters. That is only going to people that back. And we're going to have some secret tiers in this limited edition cover, of course. All new IP. This is basically MMA fighters being cloned. They get like cloned variants that they plug into that are kind of like these beasts. And they're there to protect the city. So if you like martial arts, if you like MMA type stuff, if you like, imagine Godzilla meets Rocky. I'm mashing them up, making this. It's like peanut butter and chocolate. You get a Reese's cup. Guys, this is the best of two worlds. I'm sorry, man. Awesome. I gotta hustle. I'm sorry.
You gotta do it, man. You gotta do it. You gotta build your own brand.
You gotta get that hustle. I want to say shout out to some people I brought over. Hello, Mortal V. I see you. Hello, Ryan Blue Thunder. A couple of you guys who came over into the chat tonight. I'm sure these guys appreciate it. Please look down below and sub to his channel. Get into this NFT game. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Don't get left behind. NFTs, crypto, everything's going digital. The same way you saw your comic book stores go away, the same way you saw your blockbusters go away. Now we're seeing GameStop going away. Everything's going digital, and it's happening. It's happening. But Shane, I appreciate you being on the stream. I'm gonna go ahead and kick off the stream probably for like 5 more minutes with a comic way. But man, we got so much information from your side. And, of course, we mixed it with our NFT side, but it was great to hear from you. Just a lot of knowledgeable information from collectibles, from artists, to how the game on the creator side is, and, possibly the future of NFTs with comic books.
All right, man. It's good being on. I will catch you guys later. And always, again, man, it was a pleasure. Maybe you should come over on my show one night.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. We'll go do it again. And I'll go over to your show.
Have a good one. Take care.
Thanks,
have a great night, Shane. Thank you. So, guys, that was Shane Davis on the stream. All right. And it's important for you guys to get this information because we actually get to see what's going on the other side. And we're seeing his perspective on VeVe. We're seeing his perspective on NFTs, and he's telling us about his world. So I gained a lot of great information from just him, and he's even putting the street sense of it, of things to look out for in the street world that we could actually implement and see already happening on VeVe. And one of the things that he brought up is that we're getting the Batman Black and White series that they're like 10 years old. So what are we going to be getting now in the future? I never thought about that. So pretty amazing what was going on. By the way, guys, also add the comic way, at his YouTube, add him on Twitter. Great having him on here as a guest as well. And the comic way, guys, Follow him on YouTube. All you got to put is YouTube search The Comic Way, or go to his Twitter, which is The Comic Way as well, and subscribe to his channel. The Comic Way is on here on Twitter. Let me put his Twitter page out here so you guys could also click on it, and from there you could also follow him on Twitter as well, for The Comic Way. But yeah, bro, you have anything you want to say, man?
Dude, that was cool, man. Like, dude, honestly, like, thanks for having me on. That was really cool for us to talk to Shane. I mean, it was it was kind of depressing, man, when he started telling me how the artists kind of get shafted sometimes, man. So I mean, it was kind of cool to get his insight on that. And it was cool when you were going. I loved when you were going through all the different models. He immediately knew all these guys. He even said, "Hey, Kenneth Rockefeller, the first Superman, that's my friend." I'm like, dude, that's pretty damn cool, dude.
Yeah, the connection, and I'm pretty sure he's actually gonna find out more answers to our questions, right? He's gonna call these other artists and, hey, what is VeVe doing with you, with you guys? You know, are you guys getting paid any type of royalties or anything?
Well, I saw him texting, he was texting, I think, Kenneth Rockefeller. He's probably like, hey, dude, did you know your Superman is the first appearance of Superman on VeVe? I mean, that's cool crap right there, dude.
That is. Also, one of the things that he said is that, right, we learned from OpenSeas all the copyright infringement that is going on OpenSeas, right? And that was one of my conspiracy theories that I've been wondering about. Once VeVe
get taken down, man, all that stuff's gonna get taken down.
And that's the thing. Once VeVe actually gets cross-chain interoperability, right? And we go to OpenSeas, we go to Rare Rooms, we go to Portion.io and all these other marketplaces, we could see all these other NFTs most likely get taken down by DC Comics and Marvel. And we're going to see our VeVe collectibles actually come up in value as they're actually licensed. And the NFT artists, I'm sorry, the actual artists from DC Comics and Marvel, even though they have NFTs on these marketplaces like OpenSeas, they only could sell one of a kind. So we actually learned that as well. And the superhero, for him to get royalties on some of them, they actually have to own part of the equity rights of that superhero. So that's why some of these artists are possibly getting paid through VeVe and getting some type of cut on VeVe, which, you know, he could actually get those answers. It was amazing having him on here because we actually learned a lot about at least the Marvel side and the DC Comics side perspective when it comes to VeVe and NFTs. Also, fun under the sun, man. Appreciate you for the $4.99 super chat, bro. Let's take 3 seconds to smash that like button, man. Appreciate that donation, man. Thank all of you guys for being on the stream. But yeah, comic, bro. We learned a lot from these from this stream, and we actually got a lot of useful information that we could actually take back to the community. And
absolutely, hopefully, you know, thanks for having me, man. I was honored to be on your show, dude.
Yeah, no, same thing. Likewise, no, thanks for you to being on the show, and also for Shane Davis, you know, getting him as a one-of-a-kind guest is just truly amazing. But yeah, any last words, bro, that you want to say before we wrap it up?
Dude, nothing, man. Just thanks for everybody that was watching. Those are out.
Well, guys, appreciate all you guys for being on the stream, guys. I'll catch you guys on the next live stream, and for sure catch you guys on the next drop. I'm always going to be bringing you guys guests that just going to bring knowledgeable information. I know this stream was pretty long and hefty. We're almost at a 2-hour mark, but a lot of valuable information. And also we just got to see the whole other side and just more information when it comes to NFTs. The Comic Way getting much love. VeVe will come out on top while the others will fizzle out. Completely agree. Stop the Omi FUD, by the way. There's a lot of Omi FUD going out there, guys. Omi just got started. What are you guys talking about with this whole Omi FUD? It just got started. All right. You want to catch something when the train hasn't taken off yet. If you're catching something when the train already took off, it already left you, bro. You might make some money, but it's not going to be life-changing money. All right. So stop this damn Omi FUD. All right. It's still too early in the game. Omi definitely has utility. All right. We're getting the token burns, and the other utility is soon to come. All right. But it's a project that is just running on its own platform, on its own application. All right. It's always been meant for Omi to be used with the VeVe platform. So just stay patient. All right. We're not going to get rich from one day to another. My lady saying, always remember to stay alpha. I'm not on the OBS. I'm actually on StreamYard right now. I thought you were doing the giveaway. Yes, the giveaway tonight, bro. They don't want to cut people short. So let me go ahead and mirror the screen, guys. I already got the wheel. I've been typing names up at the same time as all of you guys been on here. The first one, guys, is going to be for the Common Dragon Girl. All right, the Common Dragon Girl. It's going to be the first one. And let's go ahead and spin this. Let me shuffle this first. I haven't done this in a while, so let me shuffle the names over here. The Common Dragon Girl, guys. Let me go ahead and spin the wheel. So Arizu, is Arizu on the stream? So Arizu, if you're on here, hit me up on Twitter. Hit me up on Twitter for that. For Arizu. Now the other one is the rare DeLorean, guys. The next one will be for the rare DeLorean. I'm gonna take out Arizu out of here. Let me take out Arizu out of here. Next one will be for the rare DeLorean. I'll be contacting you guys as well on Twitter. Okay. For everyone that actually signed up on Twitter, let me shuffle this, and this is gonna be for the rare DeLorean. Ryan Blue Thunder. Where's Ryan Blue Thunder? Rin Blue Thunder. That was somebody else on Twitter, guys. I will be contacting these people as well on Twitter. I know the stream was actually long. I usually like to wait for people to be on the stream, but I know the stream was actually very, very long. But again, very, very useful stuff going on. Ryan Blue Thunder, man, congratulations, but hit me up on Twitter, bro, for that as well. So, guys, again, hope you guys got something out of the stream. Comic Way, thank you, man, for being on the stream, man, and for inputting your knowledge as well on the stream. Either way, guys, catch you guys on the next live stream and definitely on the next drop. Always remember, guys, let's wrap up the stream. Have a good week. Let your next move be your best move.
Yeah, man. I second that, bro.
Yeah. Stop the Omi FUD, guys. Let's go ahead and keep strong on your investments. Trust in your investments. With that said, guys, have a great night. And always remember, stay alpha.
See you guys.